and welcome to today's paper to eCTD conversion Aquila University training. My name is Josh Boutwell, and I will be discussing the upcoming imminent eCTD mandate, as well as what it takes to convert your paper applications to eCTD. Just a quick note, this is free training, and after this training is complete, we will be placing it on our website for view by anyone who requests it. If you have any concern about potentially your WebEx name, questions, and certainly any answers that you receive, please disconnect now, and you will receive an email when this is available, and you can watch it at that time. This is Josh Boutwell, and I've been in regulatory affairs for well in excess of 15 years now. Founded Aquila Solutions in 2010, and since then we've helped dozens of sponsors transition from paper to eCTD. Two topics. First, we'll discuss why you need to convert from paper. That's the obvious reason, but there are others. We'll discuss a few regional requirements, about some lifecycle design considerations to prepare your documents, as well as future sequences. There will be time for questions, and then we'll discuss our next Aquila University Lunch and Learn. Why convert from paper? A lot of people I've spoken to over the last few years, when I talked to them about converting from paper to eCTD, they always asked why. There are a few main reasons. One, electronic submissions are actually faster than paper. You don't have to worry about transfer times by mailing things to FedEx. Through FedEx, you don't have to put together binders and triplicate, all that sort of stuff. Electronic is actually faster. It's paper. The cost of paper submissions was actually hidden in a variety of other costs. So up to the manpower you required in the form of admin, type of printers you required, everything along those lines that now you don't need. And finally, you have to. We have the eCTD mandate, and it is here. As May 5th of this year, 2017, as of the time of this recording, is exactly 1 week from now. The will refuse to accept NDAs, ANDAs, and BLAs as they are submitted electronically in the eCTD format. And DMFs have a 1-year grace period. It's 2018 for INDs and DMFs. But the mandate, you may still have some time. May 5th, your next submission must be in eCTD. You still have to remember that you don't have to start submitting immediately. It's only next submission. If you have a session, a submission that is, or an application that is fairly simple, that doesn't have much activity, your next submission may be the annual report, which, depending on when you submitted the original application, may not be due until May 4th, 2018. What it means is your first eCTD was 4th of 2018. I recommend doing that. You know when something will come up, and the sooner you are prepared, the better. So if you don't expect anything for most of 2017, you still prepare your application immediately. So are some of the regional requirements. When you are going into really has a very strong impact on what you are submitting and how difficult it will be to submit. There are eCTD rules which extend across region. First is once you submit an eCTD, you can never go back. For the U.S., that won't be an issue. You have to submit an eCTD on May 5th. However, other regions, there's still an option. But once you submit anything in eCTD, that option goes away. Once you get a life cycle decision, it is very difficult to change. A life cycle decision, I mean once you put a document in your application with a certain granularity or you name a product a certain way, it is very, very difficult to go back. To the point where the only realistic way to fix that error is to remove it completely and resubmit it from scratch, which will trigger a re-review of those documents. Obviously, it's the last thing you want to do. But if it's critical, you can do that. But you want to be very certain about what you're putting in, that you won't have to change it in the future. And in general, your last paper submission should tell your agency you are submitting an eCTD. This will not apply to FDA anymore because you can't submit it in paper. But if you have the option, it is a very good idea. It helps provide a very firm sort of wall for when things were paper, when things were electronic. That way, your agency will know that you will not be sending anything else in paper, that they've gotten everything that's likely to get in paper, and from that point on, it'll all be electronic. Here are some regional requirements for the FDA. There are no extra requirements. Other than stated before, there aren't any requirements. Now we have a couple of recommendations. Recommendation number one is, since you have the option of picking the sequence number you're going to start with, you should give some thought to it and pick a sequence number that makes sense for your application. It may be the submission number. It may be some internal counting scheme, since not all submissions to the FDA are issued a submission number. Perhaps you've kept track of how many submissions you've actually sent. And while you're on submission number 6 for the FDA, you've actually sent 122 submissions to the FDA. You consider making your first eCTD 100, 1, 2, 4, or 3. And what makes sense for your organization? You're still obligated to start at 0000. 2, plan your backbone. Like I said earlier, once you make a life cycle decision, you can't go back of forcing a re-review of everything. That's a terrible situation to be in when the FDA is required to take a look at everything you've submitted, because they may find things that will make life difficult. You want to avoid that. So have a plan for where everything will go before you start adding documents in. EMA. There are a couple of recommendations. EMA used to require a backbone or a baseline sequence. This is a representative submission that identifies everything that is current. They don't require it anymore, but they still strongly recommend it. This is a lot of work to put together. It's on par with creating your initial application to begin with. It's very expensive. It is worth it, but be prepared to have time and, more importantly, money tied up in putting together your baseline. Number two, they has working documents. You need to track your working documents at least as closely as you track your eCTD. If anything else, you're likely to get confused and end up using the wrong working documents to update your application, and that's not going to work well with the EMA. Now, the requirement. For me, the sequence number must start at 0000. You don't have the option. Start it at 0. And then plan backbone before you convert. You will end up having a lot of confusion in your application. You'll find it very difficult to maintain your application, and it will make it much more difficult to refer to previous submissions when you're updating and maintaining and using your application on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk about lifecycle design. When I talk about planning your backbone, anyways, this is what I'm talking about. Begin your life in an eCTD with a detailed plan. Just when you're creating your application, to plan out your application with your new application in eCTD, you need to plan that out as well. Plan to make sure you're actually putting your documents in the right location. Now, let me be clear, you are not obligated to send this to the FDA. This is for your internal use. Knowing where you're going to put documents means that when it comes time to update that SOP, you have to figure out where it'll go and make sure that it's not interfering with anything else or conflicts with something else or is put elsewhere and needs to be moved around. You know exactly where it's going to go. You don't have to worry about it when your CMO sends an update for that SOP. That maintains consistency. By planning ahead, you ensure that all of your documents have a similar sort of feel so that reviewers can navigate through your application easily. It's not a very good idea to have some areas with very high-level granulation and some with minimal granulation. It just makes it awkward to read your application and to review it. Now, and this is not a requirement. You don't have to do this. But very rarely do I find that annoying reviewers are fun to work with. In regulatory affairs, one of the big jobs is make sure that your reviewer doesn't have to struggle you as a company. They need to work hard to find the information that you send, that they don't need to sit there and contemplate what you mean by what's in your documents. You want it easy for them so that they don't get annoyed with you and they ask you questions. you don't want to lock yourself into a format that limits your application. What this is, say you have a product that has a specific size, a specific volume or dosage for the pill. If you don't specify that correctly in the metadata, then it's possible you want to introduce a new size to that new dosage. You'll end up having to have a conflict between new dosage and the old dosage inside the metadata and the document. Not a deal breaker. It won't stop. It's not a showstopper, but it is a huge hassle. Worst scenario, you may end up having to resubmit all the old stuff in order to also submit the new stuff. You want to avoid that. So by having a plan, not only regarding what you've already submitted, but where you want to go with your application, you are far less likely to lock out your application and make it difficult to maintain. So what are primary steps? First, review the full history of your application. Oftentimes, this means going back to the initial application. It doesn't necessarily always mean that. If, for instance, you are a DMF holder and you bought the DMF from someone else, you had to do a site transfer, which amounted to submit everything again, basically, with your site information and slapping your name on all the SOPs and all of that. You could realistically and safely start from that point rather than going back to the initial submission of the DMF. Something you have to look at and decide what point you want to start in. If not, go back to the beginning. You want to identify any future plans. Are you planning on doing a site transfer? Are you planning on doing a new dosage form? Are you going to pursue a new indication? All things should be considered when putting together the plan for your application's backbone. Create the actual XML. This is not for submission. This is, again, just for your internal use. And what it does is it allows you to predetermine all the data, the structure, the locations, the file names, all of that, so you don't have to deal with that when emergency submission comes up, and be able to reference it easily when you're actually using your application. And this allows you to easily maintain your application and allow you to validate your eCTD. Essentially treats it like you had an eCTD from the beginning, and that's far easier to maintain than half paper, half electronic. In preparation, do you need to do with these conversions? So, number one, you must convert all documents to the eCTD or the CTD format. Not only eCTD, but to the CTD format, the 5-module format. There have been traditional structures based around forms and things like that that may still be active. You have that, you need to take documents, break them down, and allocate them into your modules in order to do a conversion. With this, you will not be able to create an eCTD. So, one, track all prior submissions and identify exactly which documents are current. So go to our SOP. If you're on SOP version 12, you need to know where the, in order to verify you're on 12, you need to go back and see all these 11 SOPs, and you can then identify which submission you file the SOP version 12, and track that for every single part of your application. At Aquila, create a trace matrix, which allows you to not only see which documents are current, but you see where the document was submitted, and it allows you to do the reverse, go from your paper submission and see if the page you're looking at is currently active in the application. If not, what replaced it. Now, we recommend moving all documents into CTD templates. Then doing some rewrite, optional step. Most of our clients decide against this. All it does make for a much neater package and much easier package to refer to. But it is an optional step. Finally, integrate the documents into your draft backbone. And by backbone, I mean actually create a backbone. Make it like you're going to submit your eCTD. This for your use. Once it's in eCTD, you have a lot of options for validation, searching, stuff like that. So, recommendations on document preparation. Number one, don't worry about links and bookmarks. There are a lot of work to do, especially for truly legacy documents, that's written on typewriters. And unless you're submitting a baseline sequence, they're unnecessary. If you need them, you can create them at the time you need them. The eCTD conversion is really for understanding how you'll manage your application going into the future. Recommendation 2, make sure your working documents are as accurate as possible. It'll save you time. In this case, it's not just the EMA working documents, but the previous copy, the scan copies and everything for the for FDA products, to make sure your source documentation is really complete. Let's think about future sequences. In a new sequence, you must the draft backbone as if it were submitted. What is, you should not take your draft backbone and change anything from that plan. Keep your operations straight. Is still a new leaf, so long as the FDA or EMA have never seen it. It's important to remember it will always take more effort to maintain a submission that has a draft application backbone until all the draft leaves have been submitted. That is likely to never happen if you have any sort of clinical or non-clinical work. You just are going to submit your non-clinical reports again. So in many ways stuck with the draft backbone in the future, but it's not a huge deal for things that are never going to be updated. It's mildly annoying. Now, sample link. when you submit when you refer to something that was previously submitted in paper, what you do is put full reference to the paper source. And by that, I mean refer to submission 5, submitted on May 5th, 2018, volume 2, page 47. And the FDA exactly where they can find this reference, the paper source. At the same time, you get a copy of the original document, the one from submission 5, submitted on May 5th, 2017, volume 2, page 47, current eCTD. This document is included in this sequence in section 5.2. And you, from there, that document is included in this eCTD. It's very time-consuming to actually maintain your application if you don't know exactly where your paper submissions are from. This is why it's useful to have the trace matrix I discussed earlier. If you are trying to refer to an SOP, and instead of having to search through all your paper submissions, you can go to your trace matrix and identify exactly which submission and what volume and page number provided that information. While at the same time, your draft eCTD has a copy of that file for you to integrate into this application with the file name and folder location and metadata already predetermined. Now, are there any questions? Note, Aquila can help if you're feeling overwhelmed with this and are on a significant timeline, time constraint. We have converted a number of applications, and we'd be happy to help you. Typical conversion takes less than a month. It can take longer. It can take significantly less. It really depends on the how detailed your application is, how many submissions you've had, everything like that. And during this process, we provide some eCTD training if you are interested. Now, next, Aquila University is going to be about FDA forms and the eCTD mandate. Everyone has been panicking about the mandate, but what has gone under the radar for a lot of people is that the FDA will no longer be accepting scanned forms for like a 356H or 1572. They must be the fillable forms and signed electronically, or you risk or refuse to file. Discussing what forms are allowed, how you go about electronically signing them, and any potential errors that you can look out for to avoid. This on May 12th, and again, it'll be a roughly half-hour talk with time for questions at the end. So, does anyone have any questions? Thank you for attending, and I hope you'll join us at the next talk.